All right, here we go. So let's start here with Abe Zenchi. So I think this is question 3 and 4, since they're not in order. Someone want to tell me about that. All right, so let's start here with Abe Zenchi. Okay. So who'd like to read? All right, Jason, thank you. You want to start here with a quote at the very top right-hand corner. Then we'll work our way down. All right.
As the aircraft went off, they had their lights on. The sky was filled with fireflies.
Good. Yeah. So here in the second paragraph, third paragraph, he talks about how it's kind of like a beautiful scene as he's making his travel across the Pacific and to make this attack at Pearl Harbor. So you got to imagine an event like Pearl Harbor, devastating, the horror of it, the chaos, and well, he's describing the before, right? So kind of the calm before the storm in a way. All right. So Zenchi, what was he? A dive bomber pilot. So maybe write that down for who he is. What did he do? What was his title during the war here or the battle here at Pearl Harbor? All right, go ahead. Jason, want to continue?
Before I set off, I changed my letter to my put on my vest and flying. However, every aircraft carrier has a shrine. I went underneath and prayed to the shrine. God just once. I am going there. The first group left before dawn. It was dark. As the aircraft went off, they had their lights on, and like the sky was full of fireflies. It was a beautiful scene. 183 aircraft in the dark sky.
All right, good. So we all know, again, December 7th, 1941, and this is a Sunday, early in the morning, so it's pretty dark out yet. Aircraft carrier was a Japanese aircraft carrier is trying to get as close as possible to Pearl Harbor to make this attack. And he described his early routine. What was he doing? He was changing his underwear. His nice underwear. Okay. His uniform too, right? His khaki uniform. And he's trying to look the best. Right. Again, we'll talk about it throughout the remainder of this chapter here. The Japanese soldiers, right? They went by a strict code, right? The samurai code, and something about the culture when it comes to preparing themselves for death. Right. Dying on the battlefield is the greatest honor. And we'll mention more when we get to kamikaze pilots and this Bushido code and how it is really centered around strength and loyalty to Japan. So again, you can imagine, right? He's preparing not to come back, and he's looking at this as a way to reach this afterlife in a respected way. All right, go ahead. Keep going.
It was getting brighter. I was at the back of the second phase. There were 70 dive bombers, four flying, all in another aircraft. The propeller engine was a smoke stream, so to avoid it, I was flying a little bit higher than the aircraft in front of me. I was near the end of the second bridge. The leader was at 3,000 meters. Each of the other planes was a little bit higher. I was at 3,500 meters. I felt like a shepherd watching the flock. Felt good about that.
All right, good. So we talked about that quote earlier before we started this resource here, this firsthand account, and A was mentioning about how they took off the aircraft carrier and flying through the night sky, early morning. It looked like fireflies, right? It was like a beautiful scene for them with 183 aircraft that was flying with them. Right here, he's talking about how they're making their way across and their flight pattern. Right. So typically when you think of, planes or birds like that or anything, they fly in a V, right? You gotta never see that. Okay. In this case here, he's talking about how they staggered themselves, right? So these planes would stagger, right, one on top of the other. Okay. And they make sure they're elevated just a bit, the one behind, the leading aircraft. The reason for it is because it's giving off emissions, right? You don't want to be breathing that in. Let's face it, you won't be able to see, right? These planes in the 1940s, not real great, right, when it comes to these emissions. So this would be flying in their face, it'd be polluting their cab. So they're like, you know what, we got to fly staggered bit, right? He also described that the leader, which let's face it, he was technically a leader here. He would be in the very back of the pack, right? Typically, when you think about a squad leader, they're in the front, leading the way, right? In this case, he looks like he's in the very back, trying to keep an eye on the whole squad as they're making their way across the Pacific. So in other words, he kind of viewed himself as a what looking over the pack, looking over the flock. What did he view himself as? What did he say was? Go ahead, Naylor. The shepherd. Yeah, good job. So I thought that was interesting, something else to add. Keep going.
I could see 200 to 300 bombs exploding in the ground. I immediately thought that the first group must be under counterattack from the Americans. From the sky, it was hard to distinguish the ships. I could see a huge ship, so I attacked. I later learned that it was the Arizona, already sinking. It was my first mission. I just concentrated on what I was going to attack. I didn't think anything. There were lots of guns firing. I concentrated on my target.
All right, good. So he's describing his attack here. Again, the Arizona, which we know that's where the memorial is, right? The Arizona is still at the bottom there of Pearl Harbor, where many people go to visit every year and every day. So he describes that he was targeting the Arizona, which again, you don't really hear too many perspectives of the opposite end of, let's say, a war or battle like this when it comes to Pearl Harbor. So this is an interesting perspective. Right. Also, he mentions about his concentration, his focus, and how he's targeting these battleships and knowing that he's taking incoming fire. Right. So you can kind of, I know it's hard to do, but you can kind of reflect it. You guys that play sports in here, right? When you're on the playing field, let's say basketball, football, whatever it might be, you're concentrated just solely on the play, right? Softball, or anything. And you're blocking out everybody around you. So you can kind of compare it to this. I know it's a little different, right? His life's on the line. You can imagine just one of these bullets would take his plane out. So, right, he's focused, again, just dropping that bomb on his targets like here, the Arizona. Unbelievable. All right, keep going.
I went to the Arizona Memorial. Looked underneath. Every 40 seconds, a bubble comes up. There are 1,177 dead buried there. I felt like there were bubbles coming out. The bubbles are exactly that way. I regret that. I shed a tear. Why Americans feel anger towards Japan, why they still hate us, I understand.
All right, good. So as he's visiting Arizona years and years later, he realizes that these bubbles coming up, it's haunting him, right? He's thinking that, you know what, I'm the reason why these people are still trapped underneath this vessel. Again, they're long gone, but, right, you think about that he sees the bubbles coming up from the surface and he just thinks it's soldiers, sailors, US sailors trapped underneath the vessel yet. So you can imagine just kind of what a horror scene he's envisioning. And well, he describes too, he understands the hatred towards, well, the Japanese. Okay, why many Americans will, still have that hate or that aggression towards them shortly after World War II. Okay, so he kind of understands. And the reason for it again is because he thought they were at war. And in all reality, they didn't know that this was a surprise attack. They were told that they're already at war, they're already at conflict in the United States. In other words, it's like a sucker punch, right? A cheap shot. And that goes against everything the Japanese warrior code is all about. Okay. So that's another interesting, I think, tidbit from this. Go ahead, keep going.
Most shameful thing is what I found out later. I found out that the Japanese government didn't declare war until after the attack.
There you go. So I just kind of give that one. But go ahead.
In 1991, 50 years after the attack, in an extraordinary public act of reconciliation, Abe appeared on the Today Show live from Pearl Harbor. He shook hands with 3 American veterans of the attack. After that pivotal gesture, he devoted the rest of his life to an emissary of peace and freedom. On that day in 1941, he dropped a 550-pound Elaine bomb on the USS Virginia, failed to detonate. A 19-year-old Marine, Bugler was on board. Richard Fisk, then survived the war, and in 1991, had been a volunteer at the Arizona Memorial for 9 years in the Vietnam. Against all odds, they became fast friends. Abe gave Fisk $300 and asked him to lay 2 roses on the memorial each month and lay taps. Fisk did so on the first Sunday of every month for 20 years until his death. Abe was 21 when he graduated from Japan's Naval Academy in 1937. Pearl Harbor was his first attack mission. He continued flying throughout the war until stranded in the Mariana Islands in June 1944. After the war, he was a colonel in the Japan Self-Defense Force. He died on April 6, 2007, at the age of 90.
All right, good, good. So you can kind of think of just him rehashing everything in his mind and what he went through. And again, the sincere, he's a sorrow, the apologies he has for the Americans after this event of Pearl Harbor. Seems like we don't have iPad shorts today, huh? Yeah, okay. Anyway, so you can imagine just how, again, sorrowful he is with this. He's giving $300 to this man he met. a veteran of the United States, which shows again a friendly conversation afterwards. And he gives him $300 to drop roses at Pearl Harbor at the Arizona every single year. So again, after this war's over, imagine his mindset, his viewpoint of the war after now. And he also mentions too how young he was when he was, partaking in these missions, right? So 21 years old in 1937. So you can imagine again, you guys aren't too far off from that, all right? You really aren't. And what the nation was asking for him to do at a very young age. He also said that he got stranded, right? Mariana Island in June 1944 until the war comes to a close. So yeah, this guy had a different perspective for sure than what we're used to hearing. Typically, you hear the American side of things, but I thought this was a good one to start off with. All right, here we go. Merdinger. So there's more of an American perspective, obviously. So what do we got? Who would like to read this here? Chloe, go ahead. Thank you. Let's start off with a quote at the top. We'll work our way down.
I was sure that Saturday and not the promotion. It was going to brighten up our little town for Christmas. On Sunday, all of a sudden, our general quarters and usual. I got out of my pajamas and got through my second sock, and a fellow ran by my room and yelled, "It's the real thing." There was a huge explosion and machine gun fire. I went right to my battle station, which was further down. I ran the range keeper, which calculated how big the gun should be. Since we were not going to shoot 14 inch guns at night, our safety was and more
All right, good. So an ensign, guys, is really just it's an officer that just got put into this position. So you can imagine he's a very young officer and thrown into a battle here, surprise attack of Pearl Harbor. Probably the worst nightmare for someone that just became an officer. So that's what an ensign is, if you guys didn't know. I mean, some of you probably looked it up, but I just want to give you a heads up. He also served on USS Nevada. Anyway, he talked about his station being the 14-inch guns, right? So these are massive, you can think about it, cannons, artillery cannons placed on the ship. Are they going to use that to knock out planes? No, right? This is too big, right? This firepower is a little too much to knock out these planes. They got to focus on something else. So what does his station become then? What did it say it become then? Naomi, go ahead. Yeah, good, good. So obviously that's important. So if you can't really utilize these weapons here during this battle, like you can't with a 14-inch cannons, right? They decided to use it as a communication hub. All right, good. Keep going, Chloe.
I just wanted to figure it out. It's really important for my family. I picked this season 1 years ago. And I had nobody wanted to take a vote or discuss the matter or to us to try this or not.
Good, good. So there's no time wasted, right? There's no hesitation. They're moving to places they needed in order to try to be successful and defend off this attack. So yeah, he sent pretty much half his crew up to arm these weapons here on the top of the deck. All right, good. Go ahead.
How they got underway. Then the jet really jumped on. They must have hit us a couple of times in the course of that running the channel. The ship was beginning to tilt going down. We were ordered to beach the ship to keep the channel clear. The ship settled down and the main deck almost was lost. That's what we do from the surface.
All right, good, good. So you can see the Nevada taking a lot of heat, and they decided to try to move it away in order to keep some of the traffic lanes through, I guess, when it comes to the water, right? In order for rescue, in order to get these ships in to help the battleships that are under attack. All right, real quick, guys, the word Japs, okay? Do not repeat it. Right at the time, this was like slang words as kind of a mean name to give given to Japanese soldiers at the time and Japanese people. So that's one of these terms. It's like a slur. Okay, again, don't use it. It's just you can imagine his perspective of the attack and what was going through his mind. And they were the enemy at the time. And we'll mention more about some of the propaganda pieces to try to dehumanize the Japanese during this war. And again, that's a word you shouldn't use, but during the time that was used pretty heavily. All right, keep going.
Calm and quiet. There was no sense of panic. The main power went out. I told everyone to lie down on the deck to secure air. Most of the rooms where shirts were open because it was kind of hot. We didn't really have any change of air down there. Late in the day, water began to drip from overhead. That was the first inkling we had that we were basically in this air bubble. Then the gaskets on the door started quickly and started to give way. The water started coming in. It was a couple of inches upper in our ankles. It never occurred to me at the time how we were going to get out. When the water came in the door, I realized that we were really in for it. I called up the executive officer and requested permission to hear. He said, permission granted. I told everyone we were going to here. There was no mad rush. I opened the other door to the next room. Everyone saw about it. We've been in there from 8 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon.
All right, good. So you can see they're trapped underneath the deck and they're running low on air. So you can imagine there's probably a little bit of a panic, but they kept their cool, they kept calm. And in other words, he's just waiting for any type of word to come out, communication that he could get out from underneath the deck. Again, the battle only lasted about 2 hours. So he's been stuck underneath this for a long, long time. What does it say? 6 in the morning till 3 or 8 in the morning till like 3 in the afternoon. It's a long time, right? Very low on air. He said it was very hot. So you can imagine it was just baking, right? It's almost like he was in an oven. And they're trying to keep calm as some of the water was rushing in. And as it was getting ankle high, it's like, oh, either we got to move or we're going to drown here or we're going to die. All right, keep going.
I recall falling flying around the room. I wanted to couple of decks and smell fresh air. That was the most magnificent breath of air I've ever breathed. When I got out and looked around, the whole world was on fire. Ships were burning and oil in the water was on fire. My first reaction was, Lord, thanks that I made it out of the.
All right, good. So he describes getting out of, this entrapment he was in. And as he looked around, he just saw ships ablaze, oil on the water. Again, oil floats on water, right? When you think about density. And this was on fire all around him, right? It looked like hell, right? So you can just think that as he escapes and he gets that, that breath of air, right? He's thinking that, you know what, I'm out of the mess. I'm out of the mess. And then he looks around and sees all the devastation, all the destruction around with all the battleships ablaze and many of the people lying dead around him. Right? It was probably a horror scene, if you can imagine. All right, go ahead.
After the scholarship and earned a doctorate from Oxford, he became president of Washington College and deputy director of Smith Oceanography. He died on December 13th, 2013 at the age of 95.
All right, good. So again, you typically when you read Pearl Harbor or different battle scenes in World War I, World War II, and all these conflicts that we discuss, it comes from an American perspective. So this is something typical that we do here, but not something like this when it comes to a battleship, right? And how he made it out and what was going through his mind this whole time, right? In this time period of devastation and this period of just chaos. He describes keeping his cool and keeping calm, even though he was a younger officer, right? Very, low with experience, but still making it through this horrible, horrible day. All right, so there he is, Charles Merdinger. All right, next one. Who else would like to read? Naomi, go ahead. Thank you. Do you want to start here with a quote and then we'll work down?
I was the first newsman to see what had happened.
Okay. So Kane Frank Tremaine, you guys can just put civilians. Okay, civilians, just a person that was there. It's not like they were assigned a duty. All right. I know it mentions a little bit about being a reporter then. So if you want to put that down for Kane Frank Tremaine, that'd be okay too. But civilians, they're just people that are living there on the island for whatever reason. Typically, when you're placed in a military base, you'll work for some sort of journalist, some sort of media company, or you work for the military in whatever way. So that's something to think about as you're writing down their roles, their titles, right? What was going on down here at Pearl Harbor for these two. All right, go ahead, Naomi.
Honolulu, June 9th of 1940, when the United Press News Service transferred me there to run its two-man bureau. The military was already getting quite polite. Okay. The night of December 6th, we went to a black tie dinner dance at the Fort de Racine Officers Club on Waikiki Beach. Before going home, 4 of us walked outside. It was a balmy night. There were these heat flashes. It looked like shelling was going on. Commander George Yelley made the pathetic remark, just like the calm before the storm.
All right, good. So we'll just stop there. So you got to imagine here, he works for this press news service. Again, that would be something to put down for his title. And Frank was just talking about how he was placed way out in Hawaii, right? Way out in the Pacific Ocean. So you got to imagine he's like, what is going on out here? Probably never heard of it before until he was assigned there. And again, he didn't think that any type of action like this would ever happen. But he does describe that the military is starting to pick up its activity out in the Pacific, kind of knowing maybe, right, that Japan is becoming more aggressive way out in Asia and Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands that, well, maybe something's going to crack here sooner or later. All right, they talk about being at a black tie event, so at a dinner, right, a party. And as they're looking out of the night sky, they see heat lightning. You guys ever see heat lightning before? Usually on a humid day, whenever there's like somewhat of a storm of brewing, you see these flashes in the light or in the sky. And that's what he was describing. And then he says it's just like the calm before the storm. Foreshadowing? Maybe, right? Okay, keep going, Naomi.
When I got to the windows, I could see puffs in the air out toward Pearl. On a hunch, I called the Army headquarters at Fort Shafton. A friend of mine, Harry Albright, was the press officer. I said, Harry, do you know what's going on? He said, you can say we are under attack. I said, who is it, Harry? You don't think it's the Germans, do you? Kate turned on the radio. A friend of ours named William Edwards was on the air saying, this is an air raid. This is no drill. Take cover. I got on the phone. As soon as I had sent as many messages as I could, reporting what I had seen and what I had found out, I threw on some clothes. Off I went.
All right, good. So he's trying to figure out why there's just it sounds like a war going on, which it literally was. You can imagine being at an air base like this, a military base. You hear a lot of these routines happen often, right? A lot of these plans, these strategies that are partaken by the United States, but this was a different time, right? This was a Sunday, and typically they don't do that. So as he called, who do you think it was at first? Not the Japanese, but who? Go ahead, Austin. The Germans. What? I mean, that's pretty far away, obviously. But again, you can think about the confusion, right? You can think about how, when it comes to thinking about the Axis powers during World War II, and again, this is before the United States joins, Germany was thought of being the enemy here, right? And they're the aggressor. So you can kind of see how they view Germany as a top priority, an enemy, right? And then Japan, maybe not so much. All right, go ahead.
I heard that siren sound of a falling bomb that they would always see from the movies. It hit the side of the hill, and a fragment grazed the forehead of the man standing by the pool. It was one of our own anti-aircraft shells.
All right, good. So that's pretty terrifying, huh? I mean, there they are at a pool very far in the distance, and then one of these shells come flying up and hit inside of the hill and blow up and struck a man, right? Some of the shrapnel, which is just debris, right? Parts that are, off the explosion of the anti-aircraft. So as that blew up, I mean, they're not too far off from the battle itself. Okay. And again, this is how the United States is trying to encounter the Japanese planes. So yeah, you got to imagine some of these shells, some of these bullets are going to be flying in all different directions. Go ahead.
I tried to get to the traffic was a horrible mess. I got out of line and drove down the other side of the highway, hoping I didn't meet anyone coming the other direction. Haven Field is right next to Pearl Harbor. I could see barracks that had taken a lot of hits. There was extensive damage to aircraft along the edge of the field. There were wounded. I phoned 3 or 4 times to the bureau to report what I've seen. A little bit after 11, I was on my 4th call and was told, you might as well hold it now. The Navy has cut off all communications. By the time I got to town, it was all pretty quiet.
All right, good. So as he's making his way down to Pearl Harbor, right, you can just imagine the traffic flow going out, right, trying to escape. And he's trying to make his way in. So it's kind of like a one-way road for him. And he even describes it going on the opposite side of the street to get into it. So I don't know. I kind of envisioned something from The Walking Dead. You guys ever see The Walking Dead before? Like how he's kind of just going into the city when everybody's evacuating, when everybody's going away. He's going in. It's like, why is he going into this? This is kind of crazy. All right, go ahead. And then how they cut off communication. Sorry, go ahead.
There were rumors all day saying that the Japanese were landing in the hills above us. All kinds of things, all false. One of the smartest things I did was make a big batch of egg pop. The egg and milk settled in our stomachs and we out cold settled our nerves. We didn't know if the attack was coming back or not. You don't realize how quickly the sun goes down out there. But all of a sudden we were caught by darkness. We didn't dare even light a flame on the stove to cook. Here we were, just a target right on top of this hill, but nothing came.
All right, good. So you can think too that people during a time of devastation, an event like Pearl Harbor, they think for the worst right away. It's like, is the attack over? Probably not. So in their mind, they're hearing, right, and they're thinking about other people, rumors that are being spread about the Japanese sending their troops and parachuting onto the hills around them, and that this invasion's just beginning. So even at night, where it can be a little scary, right, they decided not to light anything, not even on the stove, because just the smallest bit of light will attract maybe the enemy to your house. So yeah, I mean, your mind just starts to fill with falsities, but right, you're ramped up on that, these emotions that this war is just beginning and that this invasion is just happening. All right, go ahead.
I never thought of Pearl in terms of history, not until a long time later. As life goes on and people ask me about these things, I sort of step away and see it more as a historic event than a big and exciting day in our lives. The Tremaines spent the duration of the war working through the Pacific. Frank remained for the News Bureau, while Kay worked for the Army as a cryptographer and then for the Advertiser as a journalist. Frank died at the age of 92 on the 65th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 2006. Kay still lives in Georgia.
All right, good, good. So again, he talks about Pearl Harbor being this place way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Didn't think anything would ever happen to him out there, right? You're very remote. You're far away from a lot of places. Let's face it. You're floating out in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, for him, he views it as this historic event, this again chaotic event, right? Not something that was just something in their lives, which obviously they're telling us. But I thought that was interesting. All right, last one here. Last one. Let's finish it off here. Elena, go ahead. Thank you. Start off with a quote, and then we'll work our way down. All right, good. So Elizabeth McIntosh, reporter. So you can put that down for her status, what she was doing there at Pearl Harbor for the Honolulu Star Bulletin. All right, go ahead. All right, good. So he describes, or she describes a little bit about how, again, these military strategies, these attacks, these drills happen often, right? How the United States plays these war games. So for her, she just thought, you know what, this is just another day here at Pearl Harbor, right? She didn't think that was an actual attack from an opposing force, right? Go ahead. All right, good. So as she's making her way, hearing from the radio, right? This is a distant island from obviously where Pearl Harbor was. So this wasn't anything new, just a typical Sunday morning as people are walking their dogs, going to church, right? Playing tennis, going shopping. I mean, as she's getting closer and closer, she's realizing that this is a different reality, right? Go ahead. All right, good. So again, when you think about December 7th, it's close to Christmas time, even though it's in Hawaii, obviously there's no snow or anything there. It's a little bit of a different environment. But as you know, she was describing these shops that had Christmas decorations that they were just flying all over the road and destroyed. And this kid just kind of had a wonderful time kind of being under, in a different mindset, being a young child in a different age, has no idea what's going on and just sees this kind of as like a little bit of a celebration in a way. I know for her looking at this is just kind of shocking. But anyway, keep going. All right, good. So she describes making her way down closer and closer to where Pearl Harbor is and making her way to Queens Hospital. And they didn't let her in, right? Because they were just saying about how women were not allowed here because maybe at the time, right? The time for women being on the battlefield, right? That's again not gonna really work out. So she describes her situation there and how she was prohibited from making her way even closer and closer to where the attacks are happening or aftermath of it. All right, keep going. All right, good. So as this event just takes place, you got to imagine it's way out in the Pacific Ocean, and mainland United States is pretty far off. So as these reports are making their way back to continental United States, the mainland, right? They want to try to censor what kind of information comes in because they don't want a crazy panic here in the United States as this attack happens. Again, we haven't really seen an attack on American soil. All right. I know at this time this is a naval base, but this is still where 2,500 Americans died. So this was shocking, and they wanted to make sure that these reports didn't get back and scare too many people. And they wanted to make sure that the president of the United States can tell the people what actually happened first. Does that make sense? Right? They don't want just this crazy panic. So that's why they censored a lot of information coming out. All right, what about the birds? Oh, so the concussion from these bombs, this constant firing killed a lot of these birds. The shock waves, and as their bodies obviously can't handle that. And she described that laying all around her, the rubble, flattened areas, right? And she also talked about the Arizona, the bubbles, just like Abe did, right? And how she mentioned that many of the men were still trapped underneath, and that's them fighting for their lives, which pretty horrifying. All right, finish it off. All right, good. So towards the end, it talks a little bit about her perspective being a reporter for obviously for the United States and eventually the United Nations, the CIA, employed by the Voice of America. But during that time in the 1940s, especially during an attack like Pearl Harbor, they wanted to try to censor, right, some of the stories that were being sent out so that it wouldn't really cause so much harm, right, to all Americans. And I know it's timing, the 1940s, they believe with women being a little bit more emotional, trying to heighten the response and the concern of the battle to many Americans. I know, right? When it comes to women in these different roles during on the battlefield, they kind of wanted to censor it. So yeah, afterwards, 71 years later, right? They publish it and give her the credit she deserved for it. All right, guys, so please turn that in. That's an easy points here. I want to make sure we discuss those primary sources, these firsthand accounts through Pearl Harbor. Okay. So again, turn it in. It's an easy way to earn some points here. Some of you really need it, okay? And tomorrow we're going to move on, talk more about the home front. Hey, who sat back there? Chair goes back to where it belongs. Let's go. What is this, Chase, huh? Avery? I don't know.